I'm Scotty. I'm a practicing witch and a professional tarot nerd. And tonight I'm a storyteller. I'm glad you're here. Spooky season is upon us, and this is another in a series of stories that I'm calling 13 Days of Halloween. And every one of these stories is true, even if it didn't happen. When I was a kid, I loved mysterious things. I liked to solve mysteries. My favorite cartoon was Scooby-Doo, and I liked reading stories about Sherlock Holmes. And I really liked the strange and mysterious that nobody could figure out. If I could get my hands on a book about Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, oh, I was in heaven. I loved that stuff. I always wanted to solve all the mysteries. I guess that might explain a thing or two about me. There was a place I used to like to go camping on the other side of the county from where I grew up, and it's called Penn Mountain. And there they had on this ridge, you could camp up there, and they had a little park, and the edge of that ridge, and had a sort of a precipice that dropped off, but you could stand at the edge there, and you could look out off the other side and see this wide, flat valley beyond. It was really pretty to see all of the farms and the patches of forest. And there was even a branch of the river that ran down through there. It was quite pretty to see. There are also stories around old Penn Mountain, stories of mysterious lights seen floating through the woods in that area. I guess the ghost hunters these days would call them orbs, but back then folks just called them spook lights. And every now and then somebody would get a glimpse of some animal out of the corner of their eyes, walking along through the woods on its two legs. And every now and then they'd hear sounds coming out of those woods that they knew weren't from common critters. Well, I thought I would head out that way to see what I could see and have myself a little camping trip to boot. It was going to be a full moon night. I like camping on full moon nights because it's easier to see what was going on around me. And I had my little tent and my little backpack, and packed up some dinner and some supplies and my trusty old flashlight. And off I went. And I got out there and I made me a little camp. Full moon was rising up, lighting everything up. And I was sitting there at my campsite watching this full moon. And I thought I heard something off in the woods to one side. I didn't worry too much about it. I was just enjoying myself there in nature. Started to notice the moon was changing. And I realized I'd heard about it in my science class that day. They'd said, we're having a lunar eclipse. Oh, what a good night to be out camping, watching the eclipse. As that eclipse slowly happened and the moon started to take on that red tint that it gets during those times, I thought I heard something off in the woods. And it started to get louder. And it sounded like somebody hollering. And they weren't hollering in anger. They weren't hollering in fear. It sounded like somebody was hurting. Well, I couldn't just let that happen. So I grabbed up my flashlight, my knapsack, threw it on my back, and followed that sound. Now I went a good ways out through the woods. Trees overhead now. Hardly any moonlight filtering through because of that eclipse. I got closer to that sound. There was a little clearing. And shining my light ahead. Wasn't sure what I was seeing. It looked like a big man. But it was laying there on the ground and it was struggling, crying out, obviously hurting. And I ran forward and I said, it's okay, I'll help you. Settle down, I'll help you. And when I got there, it wasn't a big old man. It was man-shaped, but it was covered in thick fur. That fur came down and its face was almost human. And I could see that it had gotten itself tangled up in an old barbed wire fence. You'd find those out in the woods sometimes, where once there had been a farm and it had been abandoned and the fences were just left in place. I guess this creature just got itself all tangled up in there. Old barbed wire. I said, calm down. Let me help you. And at first it struggled more, like it was afraid of me too, but I said, it'll be all right. And I started to pull that barbed wire off. I didn't want to have to go get the tetanus shot, so I was trying to be real careful so I didn't get scratched up. But I could tell that this poor thing was already scratched up. And it struggled a little bit, trying to get away from me and that fence alike. And I cut my hands, but calm down, let me help you. And it slowly settled down. So I talked to it and I said, it'll be all right. Told it my name. I said, I'm going to get you out of here. And I start to unwind this barbed wire from around its ankles, its legs. Its arm was all caught up. And I could tell it had been cut. So I take my backpack off and this thing shies away. It'll be okay. Used to like me a payday candy bar. And I had a couple of them in that backpack. And I took one of those out. And I unwrapped it and I offered it. It smelled of that and it took it from me. And it started to eat that candy bar. And that gave me a chance to get out my first aid kit and I started taking care of those cuts as best I could. It was hard with them. With all that fur. But I tried to be the best Boy Scout I could be. Help this poor old thing. And I thought it'd jump up and run away. But it looked at me as it chewed on that old payday candy bar and it pointed back on down into the woods, further on down that way. I said, you want to go that way? It pointed on down into the woods. So I helped this creature up to its feet, and it was big, broad-shouldered, and tall. helped it through the woods there, and as we went further on, it just kept pointing where we needed to go. And after a little while, my flashlight shining around, there's this cave. And inside that cave, I could tell that somebody had had a fire built. There was a light coming out of it. And this little creature leads me into this cave, and inside there's more of its kind. Only they're bigger. Either this was the run of the litter or one of the young'uns. And one of these big old things stands up in that cave next to this fire they've got going, and it gets this grim look on its face. And the little one that I'd helped, I guess he was talking. They were communicating with one another. The sounds they were making, I can't make those sounds, but they spoke back and forth a little bit. And as they did that, I was figuring could I outrun them, and I didn't figure I could. My legs were a lot longer than mine. But I looked around, getting my bearings, and on the walls of this cave were drawings. Rock art, cave paintings. And you could see where they'd been telling stories. And after a little bit, I noticed they weren't talking anymore, and all these creatures were looking at me. And I thought it might be time to excuse myself and head back out on my way. And as I turned to go, the big one held out his hand. And I looked to my new friend. He motioned towards him and wanted me to give him something. So I reached into my backpack and I pulled out my last payday candy bar, and I held that thing out. The big one took that old candy bar, and he reached out and he handed me an apple. I guess I was doing trade now. I excused myself from that cave. I headed on back to my campsite. I was nervous. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And I sure knew I couldn't outrun those big guys. But I never felt threatened. And I didn't break camp and leave that night. I decided to stay. And the next morning when I got up, outside of my tent, I found an apple. Till now, I never really told anybody about this story because I decided that night that not all mysteries need to be solved. And since then, every time I'd go camping, somewhere in the area, if there were plenty of woods around, I'd always see lights in those woods as being observed. And every now and then, when I'd get up in the morning outside my tent, I'd find an apple. I want to thank you for spending some of your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this story about the Penn Mountain Lights. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, comment. My name's Skaji. Safe journey.